As promised, here is the video on note-taking, which is the other half to the video giving tips on reading, which I made sometime in the past. As this is the yin to the yang, I suggest that you watch the other video at some other point. But this video is going to give you advice on how to structure your notes, how to get started about knowing absolutely nothing about the topic, having an idea of what is actually important to take notes on, and number 4, the crucial writing step. This advice is going to be most relevant to those performing independent study. So that'll be someone doing an A-level or doing their undergrad degree, and I'm going to have a video next week that will take all of the tips that I say in this video and put them into practice live, and I run through absolutely everything. That put into practice video is going to be using degree level text, so if you find that this video is too simplistic for you, hopefully the other one will be more to your liking, and if you find that this video is spot on for you, then the other video will serve as a stretch. Use them as a guide for your own note taking, but remember that everyone learns differently, so mold them and change them to suit you. With the preamble out of the way, let's get down to how to structure your notes. Knowing how to structure your notes will make your notes far more useful to you when you come to revise for your exams. However, what is the best way to structure your notes? The best structure is whatever structure helps you achieve your objective, and in this case, it is answering the exam question. Structure is just a form of design, and design is just problem solving. When someone thought of making a chair, their first thought was the problem that I want to rest my feet. Then it may have occurred to them that they'd also like some back support, which meant that you end up getting something like this. Now this is a design that solves all of our relaxation needs. So as mentioned, the problem that you're designing for is the issue of answering your exam question. So what is this problem that you're designing for? Well, it is your exam questions and it is the mark scheme. So first things first, go and have a look at them either by searching on the internet or asking your teacher. The questions will show you what types of things you're going to be asked, while the mark scheme will tell you how you are being judged. So let's quickly look at the examples of English, history, maths and science to see what kind of insights you can glean from looking at the questions and looking at the mark scheme. I'll go into more depth later. So for English, you may have discovered that your paper is all about love. And every question that you get is centered around that theme, so that means if you make notes on something that isn't about that theme, they aren't going to be very useful. The mark scheme may have told you that you need to show knowledge of the literature, which means that you need to know the plot. It might also have said that you need to know the different techniques that the author uses to convey their message, so that means you're going to have to note down metaphors, similes, or pathetic fallacy that the author is using to convey a particular point at a particular point in the play, if it's a play. For history, instead of the plot, you're going to need to know what happened, how it happened, and why it happened. So that means you're going to need to know key events in time, such as the Great Depression or the Wall Street crash in 1929, or when Hoover was in office as president, and maybe when FDR replaced him. Maths? Far more clear-cut. Past papers will show you exactly the types of questions you will be asked, and the mark scheme will tell you exactly what is on the syllabus and what you're required to know about. It may tell you that you are required to be able to factorize by completing the square, or you should be able to calculate the volume of a cone. Very clear-cut, that's what you're structuring your notes around. In terms of structuring, this might mean that you want to make sure you have notes down of the formulas, examples of using those formulas, and any little twists on questions that are slightly trickier so you know how to address them if they do come up. Now science is very similar to maths in that there's a clear amount of knowledge that you need to know. For instance, you might need to know how do you make kerosene from crude oil, why is rain acidic, or how do you make nitrobenzene and what is its mechanism. You may have had an idea of what I just said because you were learning it in school, but at degree level you're very much learning on your own, which is why I mention it, because you have to figure out what is important when you get to this level in your academic career. Now how do you go from knowing absolutely nothing about a topic to getting somewhat of a solid foundation? That's what we're looking at next. When you're in school, the teacher tells you which bits are important in whatever you are studying because there is an explicit syllabus. It's kind of spoon-fed to you. So that means you may already have a foundation in why women got the vote in Britain when they did, and potentially how to calculate the volume of a sphere. But we're going to assume that you know absolutely nothing about a topic, and we're going to pretend that you have to write an essay in 3 days on a topic that you've never done before, and for the sake of explanation, that topic is going to be Romeo and Juliet, which means this is similar to what we do in Oxford. The writing in 3 days, not necessarily the Romeo and Juliet part. Now I hope everyone knows the story of Romeo and Juliet because there will be spoilers. Just as a note, the step-by-step video that I'll be uploading next week will be using degree level text. It'll probably be some sort of article maybe on Hong Kong, I'm not too sure yet. We will decide that at the time. But just so you know, it will get harder. Now before diving in to reading Romeo and Juliet from scratch, it would make far more sense for you to have an idea of what the story actually was, who the key characters are, what the overall plot is, and what are the key twists that happen that are significant. Now why is this easier? Why is this more efficient? It's far more straightforward for you to make notes if you know what the overall picture is. Imagine you are doing a jigsaw puzzle and you are trying to piece everything together, but you have no idea what the overall picture actually looks like. This means you have to figure it out as you go, which will make your life much more difficult, and you'll possibly get confused. Of course, it is great to read something without having an overview, first of all, but for the sake of efficiency, this is what we're going to prioritize. You can get this overview by Googling, looking at SparkNotes, looking at Wikipedia, and it will give you an outline of all the things that we were looking for that I mentioned earlier. Now, by reading the secondary literature, that is the SparkNotes to Wikipedia, it will make reading the primary literature, that is the text that you need to read, so Romeo and Juliet, far more straightforward. So, having figured out what is required of you from the structuring section of this video, you can now read the text and know what all the important bits are going to be that you're going to need to note down. That means you can keep your eye out for beautiful examples that are going to serve your objective, which is answering the exam question. In this case, we're going to stick to the theme of love, so we're looking out for writing techniques, use of language, and key events that really convey the theme of love. When you are reading through the text, I highly recommend that you underline and highlight bits of the text if you're allowed to. Don't just write in random books, because it will make your life far easier when you come to review the text again, as you've got all these wonderful signposts to all of these really important sections within the text when you're going through in your first reading. Annotations are also incredibly helpful because then they tell you what your first thought was when you were reading a particular section that you underlined. Your thoughts may have developed, or it can act as just a reminder, so that way you don't have to expend energy trying to figure out why you highlighted that section. Why was that section so important? So let's take this as an example. This is a quote of what Juliet says to Romeo in Act 2, Scene 2. I may have added a note that the use of visual imagery in the form of a celestial body, that is the moon, and the use of repetition are used here to emphasize the discontent that Juliet has for Romeo's pledge, because she is using something that is not from this earth to convey her feelings. Everything that I've noted down here is going to be useful in the long run because I've constantly kept in mind the objective that I have, which is answering the exam question. So now we come to the writing stage. See, it's all coming together. The first thing you have to realise is that you can't write down everything, which is what I used to do. I used to read page after page and then make notes on each individual. Just don't do this. This takes ages, and when you come to revise your notes, it's basically like reading the text from scratch all over again, so you aren't really doing yourself a favour. I like to think about taking notes as creating building blocks. You want to make your notes such that they serve a versatile purpose, so you can mobilise all of the blocks in your inventory to answer whatever question gets thrown at you. You don't want to have a note that makes really obscure and jaggedy block, because then you can't use this to make some sort of coherent structure because it's very niche. So carrying on with the case of Romeo and Juliet, we discovered earlier that you're expected to have knowledge of structure, language, and form, so we can use this as a starting point for creating the blocks that we can use in an exam to answer a question. So we might try to find 3 instances of each in the text, which is made so much easier because you have underlined and highlighted and annotated the text to lead you to finding these things much faster than you would have if you were doing it from scratch. As you figure out what is most important from the structuring section in this video, you may want to note down the quote, where it was in the actual text, so you can refer back to it later and understand its context within the wider play. And then you might want to write down a quick summary of the writing techniques used and the effect that they have and what purpose they are serving. For instance, you might comment on the word dagger and say how it anthropomorphizes the dagger, which might convey how she's looking forward to death, or how she is not completely emotionally stable because she's distraught that her lover has just died, which conveys the commitment of her love. As you've done 3 of each of these, you may find that when you're answering a question, when you're doing past papers and past questions and practicing for your essay plans, none of them work. What you then do is go through the text again, try to find another instance that does work, and you fill in all the gaps. For history, you probably want to organise your blocks chronologically with key events. You can then summarise each of these key events by throwing in factors that influence these events happening. So you might be talking about 1960s Britain and the social revolution, and you may note down as the most important factors the contraceptive pill, the introduction of mass media, and the advancements in technology as the key things. For science and math, you'll probably want to arrange your notes around topics such as differentiation, calculating the area of different shapes or vectors. That way you can easily jump to those sections when you're trying to answer a question. It's very clear, very concise, and you know where you stand. Then of course you just fill in the gaps in your notes when you get given trickier questions. By doing your notes in this way, you will ensure that they will be useful, because ensuring their usefulness has been the thing that has been constant throughout this whole process. That has been what is on your mind throughout. And that is really the key to taking good notes. Just to reiterate, when you're making your notes, you will notice gaps in your notes and they won't be perfect, but that just means you can go back to the material and fill in those notes with even more amazing blocks that will give you more nuanced answers, that will make your answers far more interesting and just wow the examiner. I find that when I'm taking my notes, I make summaries of my notes later, and then summaries on those summaries, and then summaries of those summaries of those summaries, and this just helps to reinforce the information in my mind. So, if you guys would like a tip for remembering your notes, there's one. So that is all, folks. I will be putting all of these tips into practice in the next video. Until then, I'll be adding all these study-related videos into one playlist, so you don't have to hunt through which video actually has tips in. It will be in one place. I'm also currently working on a day in the life video, because at some point you guys requested one. Keep your requests and questions coming in the comments, and remember to have your privacy settings such that I can reply to your comment, because I very much like to reply to everybody's comments, but the way Google Plus has integrated with YouTube, it's created some sort of confusion. Remember, you can tweet me, you can YouTube inbox me, and until next time, I will see you on Sunday, subscribers. Oh, I should open a window. Alright, bye bye, because it's hot. It doesn't smell. It doesn't smell.